Here we go. Good evening, friends, and welcome to our collective awakening here at the Purple Mountain. And it's a great pleasure to introduce today David Icke, who was so pleased that he's taken time to join us. And I'm here alongside Stephen, my colleague at the Purple Mountain, to speak with David. David, good afternoon.
Hello, chaps.
It's an absolute pleasure to have you with us.
I should just mention, though, beforehand, that I found out just before this started that you live in Fleetwood and you don't know the manager of Fleetwood Town.
Oh.
You certainly don't know anything about football. You want to
No, we're more on the fisherman's friends side of things.
All right.
But it's a great pleasure. We just want to welcome all our friends who are going to join us in what's sure to be a very interesting and awakening hour. So, David, what I'd like to speak of first of all, a lot of our friends and myself and Stephen would call this a great time of collective awakening, a great opportunity for real change, and something we feel in the spiritual movement that's been coming a long time. We've talked about it. We've felt it, and now here it is. So I'd just like to hear from you, your view on what is happening right now, what is occurring right now in the world.
Well, it's a time of great danger, and it's a time of great opportunity. And whether we go down the road of danger and let them finish the job, or the road of opportunity is our choice. It's always a choice. What we call a human life is simply choice and consequence, choice and consequence, choice and consequence, constantly. You make choices, you get consequences. Good choices, good consequences, bad consequences at other times. And you hope that you learn from the bad consequences so you don't make them again, or you don't create them again. And then you make different choices as a result. It's called learning from experience. Unfortunately, there are great chunks of the human race who don't learn from experience. They just repeat the same choices and thus get the same consequences. That great line, if you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always got. And what humanity has done, going way back into history, is to give its mind away, its power away, its right to choice away to authority. Yeah. That's what it's always done. And for me, awakening is awakening to your own uniqueness, and having the self-respect to express that uniqueness and not let anyone tell you what you must be, what you must think, and what opinions you should have. And if you break down what is happening now in the months of 2020, it is a microcosm, a massively important and pivotal microcosm, mind, of what's happened throughout history. Because, this global cult that I've been exposing for 30 years, that's behind this coronavirus hoax pandemic, it has at its core very, very few people. At its core of the core, you get them in one room. And what it does is play out its agenda down a pyramid hierarchy in human society, national and international, of imposition and acquiescence. So the inner core of this cult, which gives evil a bad name, by the way. Evil should sue for defamation of character if I call them evil. And that's an important point to grasp, because there are no limits in what it would do. So don't let's have this, they'd never do that. No, you'd never do that. They would get off on doing it. And so you have this then hierarchy where the few or the lower level getting bigger and bigger, actually, but knowing less and less about what's going on, has this sequence of imposition and acquiescence. So the inner core imposes on the next level down, and it imposes on the next level down, and it imposes on the next level down, and each level acquiesces to the imposition. And it's very, very soon after you come down from the peak of the pyramid where you're reaching levels of the hierarchy where people have no idea there is a cult, never mind an agenda for the subjugation of the entire human race. Which, when I was talking about this over 30 years, people say you're mad. Well, maybe fewer are saying it now, and so you come down this sequence until you reach the population at the bottom of this pyramid, the biggest group of people, of course. And if at that point we acquiesce to those levels of the hierarchy that are imposing on us, like governments, law enforcement, and all this other stuff, then we complete a sequence. We complete a circuit, which has allowed a tiny few at the top to impose their will on the entire human population. So if you go back to the first lockdown, and I said in March when the first lockdown came, I said they'll roll it back during the summer, but once autumn starts moving towards winter, they will have a second lockdown. It's a script. That's why it's predictable. It's not random. You couldn't predict randomness. It's a script.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what happened in the first lockdown is there were three groups of people. By far the biggest group, they bought the lie that we are in the midst of a dangerous virus. And so they went under house arrest meekly, because they thought, well, that they tell us that's the only way to protect us from the dangerous virus. Then there's another group, at that time much smaller, but bloody bigger now, that could see there was something not right about it, but they still went under house arrest meekly because they feared the consequences of not doing so from authority. And then you had the other group, which is massively bigger now, was tiny then. And that's the group that could see that there's something not right here, that we're being lied to, there's a scam going on. And they said, we're not complying with it. We're not going to do what you say. And that third group is the group that throughout human history has always brought tyranny to an end. Because that third group has self-respect. Self-respect that it will not be imposed upon. It will not have its uniqueness and its freedom imposed upon, and cooperate with it. Now, as we come to present day, that first group, yes, sir, no, sir, 3 bags full, sir, has got smaller. I can see it's a scam, but I better comply, has got much, much bigger, but also so has those going, we're not having it. And that third group needs to get massively bigger. And what you're looking at with the third group is a spiritual awakening, an awakening from the fear-based 5-sense perception of reality to a realization that we're all consciousness and eternal, infinite consciousness, having a brief experience called human. And therefore, there is nothing to fear. And when you move into those more expanded states of consciousness, and anyone can do it, then self-respect kicks in, because you ain't having a pair of prats like Johnson and Hancock telling you what you're going to do with your life and what's happening to your children's lives. It's not going to happen. So I've not, since this started, worn a mask, put any of that shite on my hands, 75 brands of which have been named by the Food and Drug Administration in America as dangerous to the extent of causing blindness or even death. And the schools in Ireland have been shut because of the impact, not least respiratory, on children, putting that stuff in all day with mindless teachers who just do whatever they're told. I am a Dalek, you know the type. And and I've not social distanced. If someone wants to kind of dart away from me in the street, well, that's their right, so they should. Well, I'm not darting away from them because I ain't frightened of them. You know why? There is no bloody virus. And, you know, if you go back to March, early April, when I did the first of those London Real interviews, the first two, what got me deleted from YouTube, what got the interview deleted within, because it was a live stream, deleted within minutes afterwards, what got me deleted from Facebook and many other platforms was when I said one thing. It was reported in the newspapers that I said that the virus is caused by 5G. I didn't say that. I've never said that. Why? Because there's no virus. What I said was that 5G can generate the same symptoms they are attributing to the virus, which is a very different thing. But it was when I said there was no virus, that's when all hell broke loose, because that's what they don't want people to know. Because the Nazis had this philosophy, and we're talking Nazis, the same cult network that was behind the Nazis, behind Stalin, and is behind China today. It's the same one behind this pandemic hoax. It's no accident that the whole thing played out of China. What we're looking at is a situation where the Nazis were very great exponents of something called the bigger the lie, the more we'll believe it.
Yeah.
So when you see in the alternative media, although it is starting to dilute now, that this virus came out of a bioweapon operation plant center in Wuhan, a weapon level 4 biolab, the highest level. Then the cult is not too bothered about that, because in fact it's quite happy for it to circulate. Why? Because whether you think the virus came naturally or whether it was released from a weapon lab in Wuhan, they have a common theme. There is a virus, and that will keep people in there. There is a virus. There is a virus. There's not a virus. They've never isolated it. I'm having a chat in a few days with a doctor in America called Dr. Tom Cowan. He's just released a book called The Contagion Myth. I do recommend it. And he is pointing out, first of all, and this is now starting to emerge more and more with the medical professionals who are actually interested in the truth, that viruses don't even cause disease. They don't cause disease. And what Cowan has pointed out, and this is from a article posted by the Centers for Disease Control in America, the CDC, which is their version of basically, their official medical organization. This article by about 20 virologists, as I recall, and they didn't put it in this context, but this is what it said. We have found 37 base pairs of genetic material, which we say is this virus. 37. But they say the full genetic code of SARS-CoV-2 has 30,000 base pairs of genetic material. And what they've done, this is in the article by these virologists posted by the CDC in America. They took these fragments, they put it through a computer program, and the computer program filled in the rest.
Wow.
And that's where the alleged proof that the virus existed came from. And Tom Cowan brilliantly described it like this. You find a fragment of a hoof, you find a hair in the tail, and you find a fragment from a horn. You then put it through a computer program, and the computer program fills in the gaps and says it's a unicorn. And not only that, a unicorn no one's ever seen, just like the virus. And as this article points out, though it's not in this context, they use many different computer programs, right, to fill in the gaps of this. They say it's a virus. And these computer programs produce different fill-in codes. So what they then did is they had a vote over which, as Cowan's put it, over which imaginary unicorn is the real imaginary unicorn. It's crazy. And then you've got the RT-PCR test that's not testing for the virus, but the content of the virus, they never isolated it, can they? How can they produce a vaccine for it? They have not isolated it and its genetic code. And the creator of the RT-PCR test, a guy called Kerry Mullis, he said publicly you cannot diagnose infectious disease with a PCR test because it's not made for that. You can't do it. And he said, quote, the PCR cannot detect free infectious viruses. So they're using the PCR test to get the cases, the fake cases, because it's testing for a genetic material that many people have in their body. It doesn't mean there's anything wrong with them. It's just genetic material. And that's why the overwhelming vast majority who test positive for with a PCR test have no symptoms. Right? There's nothing wrong with them. Nothing wrong with them.
Yeah.
What they've done to get over that is said, oh yeah, but people who are asymptomatic, you mean those people with nothing wrong with them, they can pass it on to others. And this is where they found got the excuse for the first time ever to isolate the healthy and not just the sick. And so you put all that together, and it's a gigantic scam. And the reason I've been censored from all and sundry is because they don't want that to come out. Why would they bother with me, mate? I mean, I live in this little flat on the Isle of Wight, and they control Silicon Valley. They created the Silicon Valley corporations like Facebook and Google, etc.
Yeah.
They control the banking system. They control governments. They control the corporations. They control the media at ownership level and down. And yet they're worried about me. Why? Because their story is so tenuous, so ridiculous. And this is why these groups of people that are questioning now the authenticity of what they've been told, this is why that's getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Because it's making no sense. Their personal experience and the government pronouncements on what's going on make no sense whatsoever. You know, I was thinking to someone today, where was I? Oh, I was in a shop. And she said to me, you know, just take into account, this kicked off in March. She said, I've yet to meet anyone who's had it, right?
We've said that. We've said that.
And I've been doing that. I've been asking people. 99.999% say, oh, I don't know, mate. Do you know anyone who knows anyone who's had it? Well, no, mate. And then very rarely you'll get someone who says, yeah, I know someone's had it. Yeah. Okay. So
a friend of a friend.
Yeah. You say, well, they haven't because there's no virus. So let's tell the story. What's the story? How do you know they had it? Well, they tested positive. Yeah. With a test not testing for the virus. So this is what we're dealing with. It's an absolute scam. And this is where this self-respect needs to kick in. This self-respect of not being dictated to with these monumental lies, where people simply won't cooperate. And if enough people won't cooperate, it can't be enforced.
Absolutely. I think it's a lot. I can relate to that because my granddad grew up, he was German, and he told me a lot of stories. And I always asked him, you know, what happened in Germany. He said it wasn't just that they took over, they just instilled fear, manipulation, and all the stories he told me and all the diaries and everything that I've still got is what's happening now in this country.
Exactly.
It's just the same. And I think the problem is, what me and Chris have been trying to do is trying to encourage people to question what you're feeling in the world. It doesn't feel right, you know, energetically, you know, and awaken people, you know, not to dictate to them, because there is a lot of people, David, as you know, that they would do anything to protect the system.
Oh, absolutely.
You know, they won't see any other way. No matter what you say to them, they are going to control. And I think these powers, they want these other people to protect that system.
Yeah, the thing is that there's so few at the core of this cult globally that you can only do it. You can only impose your will by programming the perceptions of the population, because from perceptions comes behavior. From behavior, collectively comes human society and what it's like. And the start of that sequence is information. Information received becomes perception. Perception becomes behavior. Behavior collectively becomes human society. So this is why they control behavior by controlling information, which is why all this censorship is, of course, going on. And what you say about the Nazis is absolutely right. And there's a reason for it. Like I said earlier, this global cult was behind the Nazis. So why wouldn't it use the same techniques? It's the same techniques. So you look at the Joseph Goebbels propaganda techniques of the Nazis, exactly what's happening now.
Yeah.
There's something else too about that. From about 1996, well, in fact, it was from 1996, right across the millennium for several years afterwards, I did an enormous amount of research into mind control, collective mind control, individual mind control, especially a mind control operation, infamous, came to public attention in the 1970s, called MK Ultra in America, which was run by the government, the military, and the CIA. And I talked to so many survivors. A lot didn't survive, of course. Survivors, in fact, most didn't survive. Survivors of MK Ultra over many, many, many years. And they talked about the techniques and all the different ways that they manipulated perception. And what I'm seeing now is simply those techniques of MK Ultra used on individuals played out on the global population. I was contacted by one of those survivors a few weeks ago, about a month ago now, whose daughter, Kelly, was born to her while she was in MK Ultra, born in captivity, in effect. And her daughter, Kelly, who I've also met, was brought up from birth in this MK Ultra mind control. And the reason she contacted me is to point out that from the age of 2, her daughter Kelly was forced to wear a mask. Because that's what this is all about, the mask. It's all about mind control and perception manipulation. And going on from something else you said there about the Nazis and how it's brought about, fascists do not impose fascism. There's not enough of them.
That's true.
What imposes fascism is the population acquiescing to fascism. That's how it comes about.
Yeah.
And what they do, this is the same as Germany. Whoa, same as Germany. What they've done since March is they brought in fascism. I mean, full-blown fascism in March, you would have got big pushback. But you get them used to it. Oh, it's just to flatten the curve. But it's incremental. So they're saying now, oh, it's just a second lockdown for a month. This is meant to go on right through the winter.
Yes.
Right through the winter until the vaccine comes out. You cannot come out of lockdown unless you have the vaccine. This is where it's going. And that's only plan B. Plan A is mandatory vaccination. So the way the Nazis did it was, because people forget, Hitler, first of all, was elected. And then there was no more elections. But
yes.
It was incremental, exactly what's happening now. Get them used to something and then push on to the next stage. And I've used this analogy many times over the years. What they do is they push the gate, and if there's no resistance, they walk through the gate and they walk to the next gate, and they push that. And if there's no resistance, they walk through that, they go to the next gate and they push that, and so it goes on. And so if people don't push back against these incremental stepping stones to full-blown fascism, we will have full-blown fascism. And you mentioned spirituality there. And of course, I'm big into all that. It's my passion is the reality, who we are. What is this place or world or reality that we're interacting with? What is it? Well, that's my passion. I do all the other stuff because it needs doing, but that's really my passion. But over the last 10 years, as I've traveled around the world, and in the early years, particularly in America, well, in Britain too, to an extent, but in America, you had this New Age movement, as it was called. It seems to have disappeared now. But much of it's become woke, which is the very inversion of awake, by the way.
Yeah.
But what they talk about is spirituality, and so many times what's been thrown at me is it's negative what you're saying. You'll frighten people, and I say, well, hold on a minute. I thought you said people should let go of fear. So why are you saying you're frightened of what I'm saying to start? And secondly, knowledge is never negative. It's how you use it, and it's
absolutely
how you respond to it. Now, if we don't know what the plan is and where it's meant to go, it's like this. I came across this analogy once. There's cows in a field, and another cow comes running across them and says, hey, you got to listen. I've just heard. You know them big lorries that come and take lots of us away? They're not taking us on holiday to a place that they kill us and cut us up. And what's happening? The other cows are going, oh, it's Conspiracy Joe again. Oh, leave us a bloody alone. Go away. Oh, look, I'm going on vacation this week. Just leave us alone. And it might be perceived that Joe the cow saying that is negative and it's making people frightened. But what it's bloody doing is telling the cows, don't get in the bloody lorry. And that's a positive thing. So if we don't know where this is meant to go, then we can keep agreeing to it as it incrementally goes towards it. And eventually we get there. And that's not far into what we call the future either. So when I'm talking about spirituality, so much of what I see described as spirituality is actually escapism. It's like, I'm going to do a bit of meditation and I'm going to, kind of withdraw from the world and all that stuff. And I'll kid myself that that's all I have to do. When if people just do that, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it, just do that, you're going to have a situation eventually where the whole world will be a ball of fascism. We've reached the point, of course, this very week, where a lady is arrested for going to a care home to take her 97-year-old mother home.
I saw that. I was reading about that this morning.
It's extraordinary. But that's just an inkling of where it's going. If people think it's bad now, where it's meant to go, what's happening now is Mary bloody Poppins.
Yeah.
So, I've been aware of this for so long and abused for it and ridiculed for it, but this is it. This is where it's going. But there are billions of us, and there are a relative kind of handful of them in full knowledge of what they're doing. And we can sort this out, but only if people stop being in denial of what's going on. Because, a lot of the stuff where people say, oh, no, shut up. I say to some of them, are you trying to convince me or yourself?
Yeah.
It's themselves.
Yeah.
They don't want to face it. And when people like me are saying this is what's happening, this is what is planned, they don't want to hear it because it means they have to face it, and they don't want to face it. But I'll tell them now, if they don't want to face what's happening now, we'll stick around, because where we're going would make your bloody hair curl if we allow it.
Absolutely.
And there's a line. We've got to draw the bloody line now. So the thing is about spirituality, it's not about just an esoteric concept. It's taking a state of perception, a state of consciousness, a state of self-respect, and playing it out in action. And that means if you're spiritual in its true sense, you're not going to let this pair of prats in Westminster, who are just frontmen anyway, it's the dark suits you never see that you're driving it.
Yeah, that's true.
You're not going to let them dictate your life. You're not going to let them put masks on your children, never mind yourself, which a neurologist, a consultant neurologist came out a couple of weeks ago and said to wear a mask, especially if you're, everybody, but especially if you're a child or a young person, when the body is still growing and developing and needs a very large amount of oxygen. If you put a mask on people, it starts to dismantle the brain because the brain is not getting enough oxygen. And she pointed out that when you first wear a mask, and the brain, the body in general, every organ loses oxygen and starts to get carbon dioxide that its body's trying to expel too with the mass. But what you get is a reduction of oxygen to the brain, optimal oxygen to the brain. And she said that what happens at first is the body responds to that, and you can feel nauseous, you can feel, fatigue, lots of things, headaches, all of it. She said, but what happens then is the body readjusts and you don't have those symptoms anymore. But the brain is still receiving less oxygen than it needs. And therefore, although you may not feel the symptom anymore, your brain's being dismantled by lack of oxygen. And this is happening to kids. This is happening to kids in school. And where these psychopaths want to take us in Britain, it's already happening around the world. It's a global agenda. Therefore, anything happening elsewhere is meant to happen here. Anything happening here is meant to happen elsewhere. They want a situation where you cannot leave your home without wearing a mask.
We believe that. We believe that's what they're heading, definitely. Yeah. Even with vaccines.
This is the increment.
Yeah.
You see, just very quickly, there is this script, which is why I can predict it, because it's the script. And so people asked a very relevant question when the mask was brought in. They said, well, hold on a minute. You had all these, what you claim were deaths. They weren't. They were redesignated to COVID-19 when people died of other things.
Yeah.
But you had all these deaths. And you said masks weren't necessary. And now, when the deaths have gone down, even by your ludicrous figures and counting, you're now saying, masks, what? What? Because if you'd have thrown everything in your script at people at the start, like the masks, there'd have been this pushback. Yeah. But you do it incrementally. And that's why the point on the script where you start bringing in the masks was at a time when it's not justified by events. But it doesn't need to be, because it's justified by being part of the script. And so we're moving towards you can't leave your home without a mask. Well, watch me. Watch me.
I mean, the way we see it, it's the battle between truth versus illusion. And like what's been mentioned, there are many who will fight for that illusion, who will defend it as well. And just backtracking there a bit, and when we talk about the Nazis, and exactly right, it was brought in slowly, very slowly. But there's a tremendous documentary out there called Rise of the Nazis, and it actually is the lead up to just before the Holocaust and the events. And there were so many opportunities to turn things around, to stop it. But by the time they got to a certain point, it was too late. It was too late.
That's exactly what we're seeing now. And, you mentioned a couple of times that people defend the system. There's that great line in the Matrix movie from the Morpheus character about the population being so inert that they will defend the system. That's
absolutely
that effect. And that's true. I look around, you see, and I see Stockholm syndrome everywhere. Stockholm syndrome, for people who haven't come across it, is the psychological state where, for instance, if you're taken hostage by some terrorist group, you end up being an apostle for the terrorist group. And I see this all the time. And this does go into something I said earlier. They when you can point out as much evidence as you like that they're lying to us, but you see the people defending the government. And there's a reason, there's a big reason they're defending the government. Going back to what we talked about earlier, they don't want to face what they're facing. So if they have to accept or choose to accept that the government they thought was benevolent, and all the authorities that go with it is actually so freaking evil that it would do what it's done, destroy livelihoods. So there's absolutely reason for that. Destroy people's lives. If they have to face the fact that their government would do that, then they have to face massively that the world is nothing like they thought it was, and it's not.
Mhm.
And they don't want to do that. So they get around it by defending the government. Again, it's another expression of fear.
Yeah, I think the latest thing we've seen this week as well, that you could see coming, is the terrorist levels being up to the alert, which is, you can see it playing out like a narrative. Very much so, like literally trying to frighten people into leaving the houses. Oh, don't leave, anything could happen. So it seems they're really trying to tap into that fear.
Well, I said my latest book was published in August, and my goodness me, it was perfectly timed. Although when I started it and we chose the publication date, none of this had kicked off. But I said in that book towards the end, after I'd taken the whole virus hoax apart with very, very detailed evidence, it's a book called The Answer. I said at the end then, they're now going to throw everything at us. First of all, they're going to up the ante, and they're going to make it seem like more and more people are dying of COVID-19.
Yeah.
Right. So what they've done, if you notice, is they've just fused the flu figures with the COVID-19 figures.
Yes.
With the same frickin' symptoms.
Yeah.
Do you know flu has disappeared? Flu has disappeared.
That's
what we said yesterday.
Yeah.
Flu is gone. During the Southern Hemisphere winter, in the biggest province in South Africa, which includes the biggest city, biggest province in terms of numbers, I suspect, because it's the biggest city, Johannesburg, and the capital, Pretoria. At that time, they had 1 case of flu through the whole bloody winter. And notice, well, a few things here which connect. One, they're fusing the figures. They say, we're not going to just bring out COVID-19 figures now. We're going to bring out, we're going to fuse them. The CDC, the Centers for Disease Control in America, I mentioned before, they've just announced in America they're going to do the same. And at the same time, they are pushing this flu vaccine. Well, hold on a minute. According to your bloody graphs, flu's disappeared. What do we need to vaccinate 30 million bloody people for the flu, including kids?
Yeah.
I tell you, a few things. One, there's going to be things in that vaccine that are going to have health implications. And another thing is that it's going to ping more positive tests with a PCR test.
Yeah.
They had the flu vaccine in Wuhan, flu vaccine in northern Italy, all played out before this thing kicked off. And again, it's all connected. And if people just need to stop believing. I mean, look at history, right? Governments lie. It's what they do. It's their calling card. So when governments lie, then you surely must question everything they say. And instead of saying, well, the government says this, so it's true, it's to say, hold on a second, governments bloody lie. So what they're telling me, I'm going to check this out. And then you ask the classic question, who benefits? Who benefits from me believing what this government is telling me? Well, who's benefited from people believing what governments have said since March? Anyone that wants to impose a fascist state and destroy the world economy, destroy people's livelihoods, and make them dependent on the state, so they have to do what they're told to get a measly income. That's who benefits. And it's time for people to grow up and move into maturity. More and more people are getting it, but there's still a vast number of people who are completely in denial, and a lot of that is that they're clueless. I mean, there's that old phrase, there's no fool like an old fool. And that's true. But it's not true of old people. I'm supposed to be an old person. I'm 68. But the thing is that if you go through your entire life and you do not learn that believing what governments tell you without question is probably not a bloody good idea on the basis of past experience.
Yes.
Then that's foolish. And if you can understand it to an extent if you're young and you've not had the experience to the scale that governments lie to you. But when you're in your 40s, your 50s, your 60s, your 70s, your 80s, and you're still believing what the government tells you, I mean that's just dereliction of duty. That is.
What staggers us, David, is that through this whole process since March as well, that there's this talk of vaccines and but nobody's talking about immune system. How to strengthen your immune system.
Exactly.
What there is out there, natural remedies, herbs, all these things that can
unbelievable. That's my argument.
To improve your immune system. Even simply drinking more water. 2 to 3 liters of water a day, and simple things like that.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, and I made that point in March. Why aren't they telling people how to increase their power of their immune system? So what does that tell you? It tells you they don't give a damn about your health.
Absolutely.
They are spending billions and billions on advertising, on television, radio, and newspapers, banging out the COVID-19 narrative lie so that you'll believe it and you'll be in fear. While they can't find the money, oh no, got the money to feed children who are hungry. I mean, they don't care about us. That's another thing, right? Number one, governments lie. No, number two, governments don't give a shit about us. Hold those two thoughts and process everything government and authority tells us through those two thoughts, and you'll get somewhere near the truth, which you'll never get anywhere near it if you believe what governments say. And what you've got, again, this imposition acquiescence, it's not just imposition on the scale of you will do this or else. It's also imposition and acquiescence of perception. So all the way down the hierarchy, these different levels are told the same thing constantly. And there are organizations, one's called Common Purpose, operating out of Britain. I'll tell you how bad it is. Tony Blair was involved in its creation. And when Blair's lips are moving, the culture is speaking. So what they do is they literally reframe the perceptions of the hierarchy. So all these different levels, local councils, government, all these levels of administrators, excuse me, they absolutely believe what they're saying.
Yeah.
The ones higher up, they know it's a scam. Of course they do, because they're orchestrating it. But those lower down, they believe it because it's all they've ever heard. And despite the massive explosion of censorship, you can still go and find this information if you're prepared to look, but they don't.
I think also just a quick point there as well, what you were saying before there, David, which is really interesting, something that me and Chris have been saying, is that people have become so passive and so submissive to the system, this narrative that they've been pushing for decades, for generations, and we are, what a lot of our work is to get people to question
absolutely
and to awaken, and to, I think people don't realize that we are powerful beings of light. We're great creators. We have the power, yet so many billions of people give up their power and this false system, and it doesn't free them, it imprisons them, and it's just, and it's so frustrating for people like us that have broken away from that, to see so many people still conditioned, still submissive, that still protect that system. And politicians, I mean, I don't even watch anything now on the news because it's just evil stuff that they can do. And the politicians to just stand there and they will just lie and lie. There's no integrity anymore. Politicians will stand there on TV and they'll just lie and they just get away with it. And I'm just thinking, how can they get away with lying? No question it anymore. I can't get my head around it.
It's like I want to be an MP. So will you lie at every turn? Yeah. When can you start? That's it. You recruit the kind of mentality that you want, and then you change the system. The two things to what you've just said. First of all, this current situation has been prepared for a very long time. They've been operating under the radar. This is what's been in my books all these years. They've been operating under the radar, and now they've broken the surface. And they had to eventually, because if you're going to change society in the world of the scene, then you have to put yourself on public display eventually.
Yeah.
What they've been preparing generation after generation after generation is reflex action acquiescence to power. Now, just look. You come out of the womb, and immediately your parents, not because they're malevolent, they've been through the system you're about to go through, and they've bought it, most of them, and therefore they pass it on to you. And then you go to school very quickly, 4 or 5 years, and you have just arrived in the world, but you're now sitting at a desk, and an authority figure is telling you everything to believe. They're telling you, in terms of their authority, when you have to be there, when you can leave, when you can go to the toilet, when you can speak, when you can eat, all of these things.
Yeah.
And they're telling you what's right, what's wrong, what's possible, what's impossible. And you go all the way through your school and college career and out at the other end into the adult world. At which point the teacher becomes the boss. Now, the boss is doing all of those things in terms of when you have to be there, when you can leave, when you can eat, all this stuff. And then you've got the government and the law enforcement of government imposing upon you. And what it does is it batters people into reflex action acquiescence to authority. And this has been done systematically. And because of that, people fall in to doing what the government says almost unconsciously. It's just what they've done all their life. This authority has said something and they've done it. And what a spiritual person does, and what do I mean by that? What someone who's expanded their mind and their consciousness into other levels of reality, not some spaceship, other levels of themselves, their own consciousness, ultimately everyone consciousness anyway. What they do is they have another point of reference. So this is the number 2 of what I'm talking about here. Actually, very relevant that it's number 2. So what you probably don't get that. You're too old, too young, rather.
I got it.
Yeah. But anyway, along with getting people to, like you're probably too young for this as well, like a nodding dog in the back of the car, which they used to have years ago. I don't know why, but they did. Instead of, they don't just want people in that mode. They want people in a state of awareness and, crucially, self-identity.
Yes.
That suits the agenda. Yeah. So what they want to do is put you in a bubble where basically you are processing all information through the 5 senses. And the 5 senses are what are bombarded with all the sources of information from the cult, the media, education, Silicon Valley, all these things. And they want people in this 5 sense level of self-awareness and self-identity. And what a 5 sense awareness will do, it will perceive the I as its labels. It will perceive the I as I am a man, I am a woman, I am this race, that race, I am this religion, that religion, this culture, that culture, this sexuality, that sexuality. That's what it does. But that's not who we are. It's only what the system, and not only the system, wants us to believe we are. It has to get us to believe that's what we are. Otherwise, its mass manipulation of perception couldn't work. So when you're in that mode alone, you don't have a filter, because you're getting all this information from all these mainstream sources, but you don't have a filter to process it. So you basically just believe it.
Yeah.
When you change your self-identity, and this is all it takes. I would say to people, don't believe that you have to go on long quests and fasts and all this stuff. Nothing against it. Please be my guest. It ain't that complicated. It's one simple thing. Stop identifying your I with your labels, which are nothing more than brief experiences. Even human is just a brief experience.
Yeah.
And identify the I with what is having those experiences, which is consciousness. Beyond form, beyond all of that, a state of being aware. And as you transform your self-identity from what? Little me, I have no power, to infinite me, I have infinite power. What happens is that very change of self-identity, of perception of the I, expands the range of consciousness that you access with and interact with, because that says little me. So what's it going to do? It's going to interact with a very small part of potential consciousness. It's got to be, because that's what it believes it is. When you go, the I is actually consciousness, potentially all consciousness, depending on how much you want to expand your mind, or beyond mind into awareness, then that self-identity expansion brings about a expansion of the level and range of consciousness that you're accessing. So now you're in the world because you're interacting with it through the five senses, but you're not of the world in the way that you are perceiving reality. Now you have a filter. Now, from this expanded state of awareness, and anyone can do it, it's just a choice, you are now not seeing the dots, which appears to be, what's going on? It's all random. I don't understand it. I'm bewildered. So that's what's happening. Because this doesn't see the dots. It sees the patterns. It doesn't see the pixels. It sees the pictures. It sees how it all connects. And this is why this cult, which understands the nature of reality, at least on this level, and how we interact with it, it has to keep us in that mode. And it's that mode that goes under house arrest meekly, because the government says, and it's that mode that goes up yours, darling. Stick it where the sun don't shine.
Yeah. So, David, just as we come into the end of the hour that we've got with you, is what kind of advisement, David, can you give people? I know in previous videos and even today, you said, we try to empower people, inspire people, guide people. What physical things can we do to really stop what's happening in the world? What kind of advisement could you give people today? Because there's a lot of people out there, they're losing hope, that that are going back to sleep, that just carry on wearing the mask, that carry on living their life. So what advisement could you give people tonight?
Don't cooperate with your own enslavement. Simple as that. Don't cooperate with your own enslavement. And enough people do it, we can't be enslaved. It's a very simple cause and effect. If governments tell you to do something and you do it, you're enslaved.
Yeah.
If what they're telling you to do is to enslave you, and if they tell you things to enslave you, and you say basically get stuffed, I'm not doing it. And if enough people do that, then it can't be enforced. It's simple. How do you enforce wearing masks? There's not enough people to enforce them. Two things happen. One, it's self-enforced. Oh, the government says you've got to wear a mask, so I better wear a mask. And the other one is, well, I don't want to wear a mask. That makes me feel ill. But what are the consequences of not wearing a mask? And I will tell you something else. And what I'm going to do very shortly, in the next couple of days, is I'm going to produce a video about something called common law. And people go, common law or law, turns me off. No. This is real simple. What if I said, and this is true, that the authorities are working with corporate law. All the laws that come out of Westminster, all the laws that come out of Whitehall, all the laws that come out of your local council, all the laws that are enforced by your local police force are corporate law. And this is why you can find it, and I'll explain where to find it when I do this video. You can find it and show it to be absolutely true that the governments, the police, all these different police forces, the courts, all the institutions of government, all of them, the military, they are corporations. They're registered corporations. And the reason they're registered as corporations is because the law that they are imposing on people, including all these impositions due to the pandemic hoax, are corporate law. And because they're corporate law, they demand to be to have validity, a contract between parties. So what they do is, first of all, they don't tell us that because they don't want us to know, because it would be their worst nightmare. and secondly, for that law and those corporations, government's a corporation, it is provable, to have authority over us, a living, breathing man or woman, they have to somehow create a corporate entity that we think is us, but isn't. And so what they do is, when you're born as a living, breathing baby, they, through your birth certificate, create a corporate entity in your name. And they have ways and tricks to create this corporate entity. For instance, if you use the term Mr., Mrs. in these prefixes, you are identifying with the corporate entity while you think it's referring to you. You are your name. You are not a Mr. or Mrs. You are your name.
That's very interesting.
So what happened? Well, I'm going to go into all this in a couple of days. You'll see it on davidicke.com.
Yeah.
And so what happens is there's tricks whereby they trick you into identifying with a corporate entity, believing it's you, and contracting with the authorities. And one of the ways they do it, the corporate entity, totally fictitious, just made up, just don't tell you, is overwhelmingly is written in uppercase letters. Look at all the official documents you get where your name is in uppercase. That's not you. That's not the living, breathing man or woman. That is the fictitious corporate entity. Now, I'll give you an example in terms of the courts and how this works. The courts are not trying living, breathing people. They may look like that, but legally they're not. They're this fictitious, made-up corporate entity. And how it started was in the days of the sail ships, when that was all the trading. They had the what they called Admiralty law, the law of the sea. And for instance, the flag that you flew on your ship, no matter where you were, indicated the law under which people would agree to submit on that ship. What they then did, this is the trick, and it goes back to Roman law as well. They then moved Admiralty law ashore. This is all over the world. And what they do now is the flag that's flying over a building indicates the law under which you are submitting when you enter that building. Now, I noticed when I first went to America in the 1990s, about in 1996, I went with this information. And I started, I traveled America, talking to no one wanted to know, but I traveled America for about 3 months, the first visit. And I kept seeing every federal building and every court, and the judge had the American flag behind him or her, and it was the American flag with a gold trim round it. And then I saw presidents, doing press conferences or making statements, and the flags behind them had a gold rim around them. And I'm thinking, what's this about? So I started asking, and there were people already in America at that time who were into all this. And a gold rim around a flag means that it's admiralty law, the law of contracts, and it's behind the judge in the court. Now, because it's the law of the sea, the law, admiralty law, bring ashore, that's why the prisoner stands in the dock. It's all around us. It's just in front of you.
Wow. This is so interesting.
So before I finish, let me just give you a bit of background. Might be very useful for people. What they're doing when a policeman comes to you, for instance, and says, or a police officer comes to you and says, "You're not wearing a mask in this shop. I'm going to fine you." They will reel off the charge, and they will say almost every time, unless they forget, "Do you understand?" Now, there are two languages using the same phrases. One is everyday, which is population, and the other one is legalese, and they don't mean the same thing. So when a police officer, and at that level, he won't probably know, they're not going to tell them, but if you go higher enough up the hierarchy, they absolutely know why it's happening. What "do you understand" means in legalese is, do you stand under me? That's what it means in legalese. So do you accept my authority? Because if they say, "Do you understand?" and you say yes, you're making a contract with them under corporate law.
Absolutely.
They now have jurisdiction over you. But if you say this, first of all, if you're ever approached by a police officer, and like I say, they won't understand, but it's important to say it, and it's important to get it on a camera if you can. When they come, you say, "I am a living, breathing man or a living, breathing woman." Don't say person. Don't say "I'm a living, breathing person," because person is part of the trick. If you accept that you're a person, you're accepting that you are this fictional entity which they have to interact with because they have to get contracts between two corporations. You don't say a person. You say, "I am a living, breathing man," or "I am a living, breathing woman." That's who you're dealing with. And if they say, as they almost certainly will, "Do you understand?" you say, "No, I do not understand." And in legal terms, "No, I do not stand under you." And you say, "I do not consent with what you are doing, and I do not contract with you." Get that on camera. Once you've said that, they have no jurisdiction on you because they don't understand. They'll still think they do, but they don't legally. And this has been tried and it's worked many, 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 many times. And it needs more and more people to get involved in this because the law of the land is not statute law of contracts, they don't tell you. It's common law, which will be explained in this video what that means. But that's the law of the land that we should, that's the law of living, breathing men and women. And there's a website called commonlawcourt.com, with which I have no interest, by the way, except that it's got good information. And what you can do there, I've done it myself, is have a birth certificate under law. Because your birth certificate at the moment is the birth certificate for the fictional entity they've created, the corporate entity, which they're interacting with their corporate law. This is something that people need to go into. And one of the experts in this, I was talking to him the other day, I'm going to interview him in a couple of days on video, pointed out that if you designate yourself a living, breathing man or woman under common law, then you can keep your business open and they have no jurisdiction over you because it's the law of contracts. And if you don't do that, then there's nothing they can do. This is a way forward with this. And, I would advise people, for what it's worth, that they find out more about this.
Very inspiring, that, David. Where can people access then this coming video? Is this on your website?
Yeah, it'll be on my website. I'm going to interview him Saturday, so it'll probably be Saturday afternoon, Sunday morning at the latest.
Brilliant. Yeah, we're going to share it if we can on our wall, on our Facebook and social media. So it's been an absolute pleasure, David. It's been absolutely amazing. Would love to do an interview with you.
Yeah, we'd love to speak to you again. Just really enjoyed it and sharing this.
Whatever I can, they've tried to censor me in every way they bloody can. Because censored by Twitter this week. The twits at Twitter.
But we've got somebody who's very good at taking videos off and saving them, and he's on the case with this one right now. So we're going to get it on. Is it BitChute that do?
Yeah, that's right, they're trying to take them down as well. We're dealing with fascism. But despite all the efforts, the information's still getting out there. And that's why I'm doing loads and loads of interviews day after day after day after day. To get out to as many people as possible, because we do have a period when we can turn this around, and that window is squeezing every day because they're moving on.
Absolutely, certainly is. Well, thank you so much for joining us. It's been so informative, and keep up the good work.
Thanks.
Thank you very much, David. Thank you.
It's Joey Barton, who's manager of Fleetwood Town.
I'll remember for next time.
That's changed my life.
Bye-bye, David.
See you later. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.